Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. I hope you're all doing well today. I'm feeling a bit better since I'm coming to terms with the loss of the lesson horse I rode at horseback riding lessons Saturday, but I have a memento of him now, and even better now that I can see just how salty Harmon Smith has gotten over Garry's mod having Nintendo stuff removed by Nintendo. Shock of all shocks, am I right? He claims that because of this, Emulation is finished, and to that I say, keep dreaming, asshole! First of all, Garry's mod has nothing to do with Emulation, and second of all, Garry's mod is still up and running. Nintendo only demanded that the Nintendo-related stuff be removed, because how dare you fucking use Nintendo stuff without their permission? Now, to be fair, the crap Nintendo is going after is theirs. They do have final say on how it's used at the end of the day, like it or not. But the thing is, none of that stuff is harming Nintendo in any way, shape, or form. Yet idiots like Harmon Smith will sit here and praise Nintendo for anything and everything, and I do mean anything and everything, no matter how bad it is. But well, let's just get this shit show on the road.
After 20 years of illicitly using Nintendo products on their stupid application, Garry's mod has been forced to remove each and every piece of Nintendo property on it.
How exactly is that a good thing, though? Some people probably play with that Mario stuff, and then they might go, hey, this makes me want to go play Mario, or whatever other shitty games Nintendo craps out. I would say that Nintendo is a bunch of out-of-touch dinosaurs in regards to their ass-backwards logic here, and pretty much everything else that involves their business decisions lately. But as I'm absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs right now, that would be an insult to dinosaurs. Also, Harmon, you need to be very careful about what you praise Nintendo for, because what if they were to come after your live streams where you played Nintendo's games on the Nintendo Switch? That, technically speaking, is illegal. And believe it or not, Nintendo did try and put a stop to that at one time. Well, several times, actually. So would you be so quick to praise them for doing that and actually succeeding? Probably, I wouldn't be surprised. I swear to God, I honestly believe that if Nintendo were to, say, and forgive me for putting it this way, start World War V, Harmon would be praising them. Well, guys, it finally happened. Because of the steampunks, snoys, and whatever it is I call Xbox fans, Nintendo has decided to start World War V. This really needs to be said because these people illicitly use Nintendo's brands without their permission, and nobody wants to admit it, right? Then I'll make a video asking Harmon where World Wars 3 and 4 were, as will several other people, and that there can't be a World War 5 without a World War 3 and 4 first. He'll then make a video saying, a few days ago, I made a video where I talked about how Nintendo started World War 5 to combat piracy of their games, and everyone made videos bullying me on how there has to be a World War 3 and 4 first, and this just proves how there is an agenda against Nintendo, and nobody wants to acknowledge it, right? And then there'd be like 15 seconds of dead air somewhere in that little spiel. Oh, and while I'm on the topic of mimicking Harmon and whatnot, something else I want to talk about is that annoying laugh Harmon does, often accompanied with that shit-eating grin he has on his face when he does it, from ear to fucking ear when he's talking. Like he has to have autism or something, I swear to God. Anyways, I'm sorry for the rant, I got way off topic, because that's just how badly Harmon Smith pisses me off. So would you please piss me off more, Harmon? I really need to get some anger and rage out, if you don't mind.
Oof. Massive L for the company, massive L for modders, PC gamers, steampunks, massive L for basically everyone, because this demonstrates something I've been telling PC gamers for a while now. I think this has been very evident, especially after like Yuzu being taken down the way it was, and And seeing how people have reacted to that, seeing like the Yuzu competitors, like the copycats being taken down. I've been saying this for a while, but it does not matter how long people can get away with exploiting Nintendo's brand, because eventually they're going to come after you and they're going to shut the entire thing down. Now, you can cope and you can seethe. You can try and say like, oh, but I'll just download another emulator, but I'll just buy the next Palworld clone. Like I'll just support Digimon. Like you can cry and seethe and cope and moan and bitch and cry as much as you want. But the reality is, these kinds of derivative brands that blatantly rip off Nintendo's property are doomed to failure. No matter how long it takes to go through the court system, right? So that does include emulation, that does include Palworld, that does include things like Garry's Mod, which utilize Nintendo assets, right?
Sorry for letting that clip run on as long as it did, but I had to so that we could all get the full context on this one. But once again, Harmon is pulling the whole, it doesn't matter how long it takes, Nintendo is going to shut it down BS. And you'll notice how he brings up emulation in regards to Yuzu being shut down, because, other emulators are popping up to take Yuzu's place each and every time Nintendo takes another Yuzu clone down, proving that Nintendo will never stop emulation, especially considering that emulation is an illegal, period. You noticed how he brought up Palworld, which is mighty funny considering that Nintendo took down a Pokemon mod for Palworld, which makes me ask the question of, if Nintendo took that Pokemon mod for Palworld down, which they did mighty fucking quickly, then why not just take down Palworld as a whole, since it supposedly plagiarizes Pokemon the way it does? The exact same thing goes for all the other creature collectors out there, Digimon included. Nintendo has had far more than enough time to take those things down, and yet they're still up now, and guess what? Pocket Pair is based in Japan, just like Nintendo, and in Japan, copyright laws are much stricter than they are in the States, Harmon. You would know that if you actually bothered to do the bare minimum of research. So, to get back to Palworld, why take that Pokemon mod down but not the whole game? Answer me that one if you can, that is, Harmon. Same thing goes for Digimon. To get back to Garry's mod, yes, some mods in the game did in fact utilize Nintendo assets, but that wasn't the entirety of Garry's mod either, only a small portion, and I still don't quite understand how you can sit there and claim that that's a good thing, Harmon. And like I said, emulation isn't illegal, you idiot. If it was, then that means that Nintendo is breaking the law as well, which again, you would know if you did just the tiniest bit of research. Oh, never change, Harmon. You make my job, well, I call it a job, but you make doing this so much easier.
I'm curious at what point Nintendo is going to be comfortable going after Apple, because there's all this talk about like, oh, Apple is allowing an emulator on the iPhone store. Well, that's not allowed, right?
What part of emulation isn't illegal do you not understand, Harmon?
So Nintendo does have a right to take them down, right? It's going to happen eventually at some point through some method, but like the reality is you're not going to have emulations on iPhone, right? You're not going to have your Nintendo games on the iPhone, just like you're never going to have them on the PC or the Xbox or the PlayStation brand, right?
If only Harmon knew. Harmon, we've had Nintendo games on iPhone, on PC, on Xbox, and on PlayStation because guess what? Games that started on Nintendo consoles are being ported to those other platforms every day now. For example, Secret of Mana, which I'm playing emulated in the background, has been ported to iPhone, PS4, and PS Vita. The first 6 Final Fantasy games all started on Nintendo platforms, and now you can play them on PC and PlayStation. Those are just a few examples of what I would consider Nintendo games being ported to other platforms. But let's be real here, what he's talking about is first-party Nintendo games like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, Metroid, etc. But again, Harmon, those games have all been playable on PC for the longest time now, thanks to emulation, and guess what? Some Super Nintendo games are being sold on GOG.com and Steam legally, such as Dragon View and Gem Power, and this is by the owner or at least a current IP holder of those games. Just because Nintendo doesn't like emulation, which is very ironic as they've been selling you emulators and ROMs for quite a while now, that doesn't make it illegal. Shocking, I know, but it's true. Remember this, folks. Just because Nintendo says something or doesn't like something does not mean it's illegal.
It is becoming more and more clear that Nintendo is cracking down on this kind of thing, and people don't know how to cope with it, because for the past 10 years, that's been the go-to justification to write off Nintendo games. Like, oh, I'll just emulate that, but can you, though? Like, that's the reality. Like, can you?
Yes, actually. We can emulate all of those Nintendo games, Harmon. Nintendo's games have always been, and always will be, the easiest of the console games to emulate on PC, until Nintendo learns to start making their hardware more powerful. I mean, don't get me wrong. One thing that I have and always will respect Nintendo for is putting emphasis on their game's quality over the power of their consoles. But come on, man. Nintendo has far more than enough money to pay for some premium equipment to put in their machines, and it's ridiculous how the Switch is locked at 1280 by 720p 30 FPS in the year 2024, and it's long since past time Nintendo upgraded the Switch by making the Switch 2, which, as you all will know if you watched my channel or anyone else's who has covered Harmon Smith for any length of time, Harmon loves the idea that Nintendo won't release the Switch 2 ever, and Harmon is literally the only fanboy of any of the console peasants that I've seen with this mentality. I've never seen the amazing Lucas have this mentality. I've never seen the Canadian Gamer with this mentality. Harmon is literally the only fanboy, the only console peasant that I've ever seen this mentality with. Anyways, to get back to Harmon's question and to answer it firmly, yes, Harmon, we can emulate every single Nintendo game that's ever been released, and you and Nintendo can go kick rocks if you don't like that idea.
Like, again, like, if you emulate the Thousand Year Door, right, if you pirate that sucker, right, you're telling Nintendo that, like, oh, people don't want to pay for classic Paper Mario games, and, the community isn't going to like that. You're not going to get more of it, right? Like, why exactly would you ever do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, Harmon, before the remake of the Thousand Year Door was announced, we had no other way of playing the game because Nintendo apparently hates the idea of game preservation. No, wait a minute. Nintendo absolutely does hate the idea of game preservation. Nintendo has this mentality that once their console has lived out what is considered a console's normal lifespan and it's time to begin working on the next console, that means that no one will have any more interest in games in the previous console, so they get rid of all of them. They don't re-release them or anything on the newer console, but with the announcement of the Thousand Year Door remake, that, to me at least, makes the ROM of the original version of the Thousand Year Door obsolete. Not everyone is going to feel that way, and I can't say that I'm fond of the censorship they put into the Thousand Year Door remake, but as long as the game is fun, I'm pretty sure I won't care. As long as Nintendo doesn't force woke shit into the game, then I really don't care about the censorship. Well, as long as the gameplay is good and the story isn't affected in any way, shape, or form by the censorship, I won't. Man, this has been the most effort I've ever put into a Harmon Smith video script before. He really doesn't know a thing about what he's talking about here, does he?
The reality is, PC gamers are desperately trying to downplay Nintendo through any methods imaginable, right? That includes hyping up mobile games, hyping up no-name brands like Shift Up and Pocket Pair, pretending that what Palworld did wasn't plagiarism.
And where exactly is your proof that Pocket Pair committed plagiarism in Palworld? Pocket Pair is the company behind Palworld, Harmon, just so that you know. Palworld is the game itself. And I've heard people talk about how Palworld has committed plagiarism before you and after you, and so far, Nintendo hasn't done a damn thing, because if they actually had a case, they absolutely would have done something about it by now, considering how overprotective they are of Pokemon. And for proof of that, look at what happened to that Pokemon mod for Palworld. As for mobile games PC gamers are hyping up, what? I've never heard any PC gamers hyping up mobile games, but that's mostly because I don't bitch and gripe constantly about the stuff other people play, and I don't care about whatever they play, because I actually play the games I enjoy. That, and I lack your sour grapes mentality. Moving on, since Harmon can't be bothered to back up his claims with evidence, as usual.
Right. Like, it's always been bad. You know, I've talked at length about how, like, people make up that myth about how, like, the N64 had a weird controller, or it had no games, or, like, it was hard for third parties to code for, or something. Right? Like, I've talked at length about all of that, right?
Look, man, I loved the Nintendo 64 when it came out, but come on, man. Even I will admit that the Nintendo 64 controller was friggin' weird. And it was! You would have to be absolutely delusional beyond belief to not admit that the Nintendo 64 controller was weird. As for the Nintendo 64 library not having any games, do you mean RPGs by any chance? Because while there were a few RPGs for the system, yeah, that was Nintendo themselves saying that, and it's true. I can count on one hand all the RPGs for the Nintendo 64, and I would probably have at least one or two fingers left to spare. Paper Mario, Quest 64, Aiden Chronicles, The First Mage, Ogre Battle 64, Person of Lordly Caliber, and that's all the RPGs for the Nintendo 64 I can think of off of the top of my head. I did in fact have one finger left to spare. Another thing to consider is how most developers wanted to use the SNES PlayStation add-on for the CD playing ability, but Nintendo betrayed Sony and left to form a partnership with Philips CDI, which caused the development of the PlayStation 1 as we know it today. And since PlayStation will be using CDs instead of cartridges, the developers who did leave Nintendo for PlayStation did so for that very reason.
But, like, the reality is, all of those excuses are getting brushed aside, and gamers cannot, like, come up with more, cannot invent new excuses to downplay Nintendo consoles, right? Like, the narrative has always been that, like, well, I don't want a Nintendo console, so I'll just play my Nintendo game somewhere else, but there's not gonna be anywhere to play those games. Like, already there's not. Like, people are desperately trying to downplay it, right? But the reality is, you're simply not going to get...
Harmon, either cut the drinking water thing from your videos or finish your sentence/paragraph of quote-unquote knowledge first. Also, who on God's green earth is downplaying Nintendo? You say that crap in damn near every single one of your videos, if not outright every single one of them. You say it, and you then just move on, hoping that no one will question what you're saying as if they were mentally retarded children. Like, list some names, Harmon. List the names of the people who you claim are downplaying Nintendo. It's not that hard. Also, I prefer to play my shit on actual Nintendo hardware, believe it or not. But emulation is just so much easier to set up, and you get so many more options. And guess what else? Even if Nintendo goes after all of those emulators and gets them all taken down, and if Nintendo should get every known ROM website taken down, guess what? Some replacement is just going to pop up to take their place. To use the cockroach analogy, if you kill one cockroach that has somehow managed to find its way into your house, then congrats! You killed that one cockroach, but guess what? There are about 40 more cockroaches where that one you just killed came from, and there are probably 40 more nests of cockroaches in that same house at that. Same thing applies with emulators, ROM websites, and whatever other bollocks you've been bitching about this entire video. I don't know, I don't really care anymore, there isn't that much time left in his video, but we're gonna cover the whole thing, because his original video is only like, 5 minutes and 18 seconds long? So why not cover the whole thing, right?
Nintendo emulation legally on any forms of hardware. So that stuff is going to get cracked down on. Fan games are getting cracked down on. Assets and tools being used. All Nintendo needs to do is expand to the point where they can just take down that stuff one after the other. Again, they're expanding. They're getting more and more brutal about this, right? It's not something you're going to be able to get away with for very much longer, right? The reality is you will never, ever be able to destroy Nintendo, and it's very, very exciting to see. Like so many people cope and seethe about this. It's just Nintendo cannot be beat.
Dear God, the saltiness from Harmon in that last clip was something else, was it not? Nintendo cannot be beat. You will never, ever destroy Nintendo. Who is trying to destroy Nintendo, Harmon? From the way you talk, as well as the way you yourself have actually made me grow to hate Nintendo, more than Nintendo themselves have made me hate Nintendo. I wonder if you yourself are trying to destroy Nintendo. It wouldn't surprise me. Watch, one day when he illegitimately hits 1 million subscribers, he'll say, "Well guys, it finally happened. I hit 1 million subscribers, and as a milestone, I wanted you all to hate Nintendo so you would subscribe to me to get me to 1 million subscribers because I actually can't stand Nintendo because I don't know how to turn on my Nintendo consoles." This really needs to be acknowledged because Nintendo doesn't know how to make a good console and nobody wants to admit it, right? They didn't know that if you want a console to truly sell well, you have to put some Nintendo porn on it, and Nintendo failed to do that, right? Sorry for the little rant there, and sorry for the mention of porn, but remember when Harmon was talking about putting porn on the Steam Deck, and then I edited that clip for an intro into how he broke into your house and illegally put porn on your Nintendo Switch, and then he laughed about it? Ah, those were the days, weren't they? Unfortunately, due to drinking 2 shaker cups of G-fueled up milk, I actually don't know the best way to end this video, so I guess the best thing to do was just emulate Harmon like I've done in this video, so I will! Well guys, it finally happened, but God has caused the heat death of the universe, and guess what? Nintendo wasn't destroyed. It's like I always said, Nintendo will never ever be beaten or destroyed, and I was right because... because God triggered the heat death of the universe, and Nintendo is the only one left now, and nobody wants to acknowledge it, right? This really needs to be said because before the heat death of the universe occurred, everyone was saying that Nintendo wouldn't survive it, but they did. There was this narrative that Nintendo would go along with the rest of the universe, but nobody wanted to admit it. Well, who's laughing now? Everyone was bullying me for saying that God really needed to hurry up with the heat death of the universe, and now that it's happened and we're all in death's cold embrace, Nintendo is all we have left to play, and nobody wants to admit it, right?